Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Neovation webinar today on AI and L&D, Friend Forward the Future. I'm Susan Hurrell. I'm the Director of Sales Enablement here at Neovation, and I have the privilege of putting together these webinars with our team to provide you with some information and some education, the ultimate in show and tell sessions. Um, so some people are going to continue to come in as we get started. So some housekeeping for the day. Many of you sent in questions when you registered for the webinar, so Philip has all of those. And we also have the chat function that you can ask your questions in as we go through the webinar. Please do let no question go unasked, and we will do our best to get through all of them during the session. If there's something that's really complex, given that we do have time constraints, Philip will circle back to you separately outside of the webinar to make sure that all of your questions are answered. And he's going to go as deep as he can in this vast topic of AI. This is a topic that's consuming the world right now. So he's going to go as deep as he can in the time allotted, and he'll have some questions for you to answer as well in the chat. So we look forward to your participation. At the very end, I have small dogs that love to participate as well. Um, at the very end of the session, there's going to be a very short survey that pops up right at the end. Please take a minute to answer those couple of questions. I think there's maybe 5 that really helps us know how the webinar landed with you, if it answered your questions, and gives us some ideas for planning going forward. So you'll close your webinar browser and then it'll pop right up on your screen. We we ask you to please take just the 30 seconds it's going to take to click on those questions and give us some answers, and we appreciate that very much. So enough about all of that housekeeping stuff. I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague for longer than either of us want to admit, probably 15, 16 years at this point, Philip Giles. Philip, like I am, we are technology early adopters and enthusiasts. Um, and he brings really deep insight into how various technologies can have a positive impact on L&D efforts. Um, Everything from sales and marketing right through to content creation, course building, and analytics. He is so well versed in this topic. And because it is so vast, we'll get through as much as we can. We look forward to everything you're going to share with us, Philip. I know you've got lots of tabs open and things you want to show us in real time. So I'll stop talking so you can take it over. Philip Giles, over to you.
Thank you, Susan. It's always a pleasure, and it's going to be 17 years this year that we've been working together across a couple of organizations. So always a joy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I appreciate it. And as Susan said, these are really tricky webinars to do because when we look at the questions we were asked, we've had everything from what's AI and Chat GPT through to some questions that are too sophisticated for me to be able to answer sensibly, certainly within an hour. So please bear with me. Hopefully there is something for everyone in this as we go through. Also, please bear in mind a couple of housekeeping rules from me. Number one is you can see a lot of tabs across the top. So I'm going to be doing some stuff live. It's always a little nerve-wracking doing things live rather than having them preset. So please bear with me if one of them doesn't behave as expected, and I can almost guarantee that one of them will not behave as expected. And the other thing is similar to Susan, I have youngsters in the house with me. My 2 daughters are home from school sick today, and whilst they have strict instructions to only come and bother me between noon and 1 if 1, the house is burning down, or 2, someone has severed a limb, we will find out whether that is actually how they behave. So without further ado, let's get going. Little bit about Neovation as an organization, just to set some context for where we're coming from. We're a learning and development company. We work the whole way across the learning and development space, whether it is learning management system provision, custom content development, business intelligence, content libraries. We even develop some in-person training. Not very often, but we do that. So pretty much anything you can think of in the L&D space is something that we touch. I also want to just add on to something that Susan said as well about me being a tech early adopter. I kind of am, but I'm kind of not. I still have an iPhone 11. I'm a believer in technology that works. I've been interested in AI since reading a book in the 1980s called Gödel, Escher, Bach, which I would heartily recommend to everyone, even though its predictions about AI are horribly, horribly wrong. Um, and I'm actually an AI skeptic, but I do like automating things. I don't like things for the sake of them. I like things that make my life easier. Okay, so our agenda for today. Firstly, we're going to talk about why we're here. Then we're going to talk briefly about what is AI. AI is a friend, AI is the foe, AI is the future. I don't think there's going to be too much alliteration in here, so that may be it, just friend, foe, and future. So why are we here today? And I jumped ahead there. So on a scale of 1 to 5, can you pop in the chat how much impact do you think AI is going to have on L&D this year for you? So not in the future at all, not what's it done so far, but on a scale to 5, where 1 is it's going to make no difference to me at all, to 5 it's going to completely change everything. And we're just going to wait a few seconds for the results on that. Susan, once a decent number of results are in, could you summarize it for me?
We're in the high 4s and 5s when I look at this as an average. We have a couple people saying 2. We have one person enthusiastically who says 7, which is right off the 1 to 5 scale, but lots of 4s and 5s. So definitely people see that it's going to have an impact.
Awesome to have at least one rule breaker in the audience
Yes.
who doesn't stick to the script. That's awesome. So this was a survey in 2024 about people's thoughts for 2024 and 2025. Only 17% of people thought it would have a little or no impact. 58% thinking a lot or a great deal, so 4s or 5s. So it sounds like the audience I have here is very much towards the right end of that, which is fantastic. Let's do another survey then quickly. Where do you think that AI will have the most impact within the L&D function? And we'll wait 30 seconds to a minute for some responses to that as well.
So I'm seeing things like automation, content creation, research and ideation, learning paths, creating content. A comment about the primary limitation being from IT restrictions, probably around privacy and security, Philip, which I know you're going to speak to today.
Hmm.
Um,
It looks like mostly content creation is what people are expecting.
yeah, visual and audio. A couple of people are saying
Okay.
everything, but
Okay.
there's a vote for analytics in there as well, but definitely
Oh,
creating
awesome.
content. And
Great.
a couple questions about concern for their role as well.
Ah, yeah, me too. Mate, I am in my mid 50s, looking towards the end of my career rather than the beginning. And there's part of me that kind of wishes that this revolution happened in 10 years' time rather than now. But it didn't, and we are where we are. I did see a quick question there about where are the stats coming from. I don't have the link in front of me, but we'll happily send the link out for the stats after the webinar. Susan, could you make a note for us to do that, please?
Yep.
And I do see we've got someone who said, I want to go beyond content dev. Can we do more than that? Yeah, absolutely. So these were the results from the same survey as to what people are using it for or expecting to use it for. So right at the top, we've got things like media generation, translations, AI-enabled LMS or LXP. Not sure we're going to have the same differentiations there as we do now. Content recommendation, content authoring. So pretty much content authoring is where people expect it to be. And that's kind of consistent with adoption curves. It's consistent with L&D typically being a relatively conservative environment with tool adoption. But as we'll see, there's going to be much, much, much more that can happen there. So with apologies to those who were on the previous webinar and those who can probably give a much better answer than I can to this question, what is AI? Well, 3 different types of AI. Narrow AI can solve specific things. You can ask it questions. It can give you answers about things within its domain. Things like ChatGPT, Siri, Watson. General AI can generalize from those narrow examples. Maybe human level intelligence, maybe coming soon, but we're certainly not there yet. certainly not least publicly. We may be within places like the NSA, but we're not publicly with that. And then super intelligent AI that I don't know what that means. We won't understand it. It'll just go off and do its own thing. And if it comes, but it'll be sufficiently like magic that we can't relate to it. Okay, so think of generative AI as an exceptionally bright 5-year-old. What do I mean by that? If you ask a 5-year-old a question, you'll get an answer. It may make sense, probably will, but some of it may be completely made up because it doesn't have the domain expertise, or it can't generalize in quite the way that that we can. So think of generative AI itself as a way of drawing conclusions from information, a reasoning engine, not a knowledge base. Though we're going to look later at tying it to knowledge bases and what that might look like. And it is getting better. So 5-year-old, maybe it's a 7-year-old now. Maybe it's going to be an 8-year-old soon. Maybe it'll be an 18-year-old this time next year. I'm not sure I want to live through the teenage years of AI, but we shall see. In order to try and get at how AI works, I want to talk very briefly about how the human brain works. Human brains seem like magic, enable us to do lots and lots of different things. In essence, though, what they are future prediction devices. They enable us to survive, to look, take sensory input, take in information, and predict what's going to happen next. So that when the tiger appears at the cave, we know what to do and how we can avoid being near the tiger when it appears at the cave. And those survival-based instincts that our brain works to provide us with. So human brain, in my opinion, nothing terribly magical about it. It's a future prediction device to enable us to survive. How ChatGPT, as an example of AI, works. It creates an artificial brain by mimicking a thing called a neural network. It trains that to be good at recognizing patterns and predicting the next step. For those of you who are interested in a future call or one-to-one, I'm happy to have a conversation about this. I was doing work on neural networks back in the late 80s, early 90s. And back then, all we were trying to do was trying to get it to recognize the difference between your grandmother and a wall. It was a lot of hard work for not much results. So once we built that network, we train it to try and understand language structure. So verbs, nouns, pronouns, adverbs, and so on, and how these pieces go together, and then predict the next word in a sentence. And then we give it lots of information and say, hey, here you go. Based on all the things you've got, you can predict things. Ridiculously oversimplified explanation as to how it works. There's much more to it than that. But that's really what it does. It looks at information, figures out how it fits together, and then tries to provide more information based on that. Any questions anyone wants to ask about that, or shall I move on? Okay, I'm going to assume, Susan, we've got nothing in the way of questions yet.
We're good. I'll let you know.
We're good. Awesome. You'll interrupt me with questions, please?
You bet I will.
Awesome. So, AI as a friend. What does AI as a friend look like? Well, we're going to start with the really simple piece of AI as a friend that lots of you, if not all of you, may have seen before, which is AI prompt writing. So, how do we write something that gets a response from AI, from ChatGPT, which is the example we're going to look at in a minute, that is useful to us? It's practice, it's iteration. So start general, start with a general question, become more specific once you've seen the response to that, and add context where you need to. So let's take a look at a real example of that. So here I am. I've asked it to write some useful prompts for L&D teams, and it's produced some of those for us. And I'm going to send these out later. but we're going to come back to this and talk about generalizing it in a second. In this prompt, I've asked it to write a course outline for a 20-minute module on effective communication. I don't know about you, but one of the things I find hardest with this type of thing is starting. So we've asked it to provide a 20-minute outline, and it's done a pretty reasonable job. So we've got 20-minute module, we've got an objective, it's split it into sections, so intro to effective communication, key components with objectives and some sub-detail, how to overcome barriers, how to enhance communication, and then conclusion and wrap up. But the way this is structured, it kind of feels like it's written it for an instructor-led training session rather than an e-learning session. And what I actually wanted was an e-learning session. And I didn't ask for that. So I asked a general question and it gave me an answer having made an assumption. So now I've said, change that delivery mechanism to make it be an asynchronous typo e-learning module. Okay, so now we've got an asynchronous e-learning module where it's become more specific about the objectives and what it's going to do, how within that. So intro to effective communication, we're starting with an interactive video or an animation, we're asking a poll, and the same kind of thing then as we go through the whole of the course content. Now, the instructional designers are on the call and no doubt going to look at this and say, I would do it differently. I would do it better. And we're going to come to that later on. And no doubt you would do it differently and you would do it better. But these are good starting places and they may fit in at places where we don't have the bandwidth to do work as well as we might want to. So going through this, it's split out all of the sections again. It's provided more detail where I've asked it to. And it's told me what kind of pieces are going to be needed to be produced in order to develop the e-learning piece. I've now been more specific and said, this training is for a software as a service LMS vendor. Please amend it to be specific to those needs. So we've gone from, I need a course to I need an e-learning module to I need an e-learning module for this specific type of use case. So it's now provided more specific detail as to some things that are specific to SaaS, some things that are contextual. It's not done the world's greatest job. It feels like sometimes it's copy pasting the word SaaS LMS into the responses it had before. But in other places, it's done a better job. So the scenario-based learning piece here, it's saying where learners practice active listening during a support call or client onboarding, which for any of you who work in a software business, those are very common types of calls where you would need to use your communication skill. And it's got the emphasis right here about understanding needs, clarifying doubts, providing solutions. So it's done that the whole way through the revised e-learning course. And now I've asked, please identify if there is anywhere it would be necessary to pay special attention to avoid bias. It's given me a really general answer there. This is an example of it not being useful because I didn't provide enough detail. And we'll be looking at this again later, but I wanted to show how you need to be specific where you possibly can be. Now scrolling down through the pieces there, I've now asked it to add more detail about what the interactive scenarios it's recommended could be. And now I have interactive scenario ideas, support ticket, client email where a customer requests a new feature. Request is vague and written in a way that could easily be misinterpreted. So now I've got some really useful things that I could actually build if I wanted to. So I'm going to now ask it a more specific question. Show me an example of the vague email you refer to. Okay. So that's a really, really vague email. So we're going to ask for more detail.
Philip, we have a question about who owns the output, basically in L&D development. How is the intellectual property component handled?
My absolute favorite question. I'm going to preface every single thing I say on this by default, even for the late attenders, for I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Um, it depends on the licensing agreement for the piece of software that you're using. I mean, I'm sorry to be as vague as that, but it does. It depends on that. In the same way as your use of social media, who owns what depends on what your agreement is that you just click through, I'm sure, when you signed up for whatever social media platform you're part of. So it is challenging. You need professionals to look at that for the tools that you're using. And I think we're also, from a philosophical point of view, going to have to start thinking about what ownership looks like, because I think ownership is going to be a much more complex concept than it is currently. And there may be a lot more of unlimited usage licensing going on than ownership. Again, not a lawyer, not an expert in that, but that's my opinion for what it's worth. This will play into privacy as well when we get into that later on. So while we were answering that question, I've now got a more detailed, more detailed email as I requested, but still vague. And information about how it's vague and how the team should clarify it. So that's an example of working through some stacked prompts to be able to get at what you need to be able to get at. All of the prompts that we're talking about will be stacked. It's typical in the same way as if you write a first draft of something, you go back and write a second draft. Your first idea about something is very rarely where you finish. It's the same with AI. Okay, so we've just looked at text. I'm going to jump through now some other examples of where it can be used, and then we're going to look at some tools that we're using it for, and see how some of those might be applied to L&D more generally. So, image generation. You can use AI, whether it's Bing in this example or whether it's something else, as we'll see later. You can use it to generate images of pretty much any type. Again, this is where you want to pay attention to the legalities of the licensing. Again, not a lawyer, not legal advice. So image creation, image manipulation, to be able to make an image look brighter, remove this component, add another component. Extending from images out to video, where creating videos, AI actors, something that we're doing a lot of currently, and creating that from text or from whatever other source material you have. But there are also other tools that you can use to just go ahead and create courses. Again, L&D professionals on this are going to say, these aren't really courses. They're not very good. I can do better. Completely get it. So let's take a look. This is Learning Studio AI, one tool. You can enter a subject. Let's pick something. AI tools for L&D professionals. I can just click create course and it'll go away and create me a course. We'll come back to that in a second. It's going to take a while. But here's a course that I built earlier today using it, saying I want a course for workplace communication in a software company. Now, this is just a text-based course. It does cover some of the information in a relatively straightforward way. It's not great about having examples in there, but some nice things I can do. I can go in and I can edit it. So I can make changes, put in whatever I want here. I can also go in and download this as a score module and drop it straight into my learning management system. Or if I've got a paid subscription, I can download it as a PDF. So I could generate a small piece of training like this very, very quickly using a tool like this. And there are many others. All the tools I show you, there are many other examples of those. I've just picked some to be able to show you within the webinar. Okay, now we're on to some things that are a little bit different beyond content creation. Data analysis. What do I mean by that? So I think we had one person or maybe a couple answer that one of the things that they're looking forward to being able to do with AI or expecting to be able to do AI is to draw correlations, to be able to look at data and see what comes out of it. We'll look at an example of that in a sec, because that can then come through to course recommendations, whether directly within, for example, a learning management system or in an instructor-led environment, and then extending on from that, personalized learning journeys for people. So what does that actually look like? Here we are. I'm in ChatGPT. I've given it a data set of that's very rough, but it's course quiz scores and outputs. So a KPI that we're measuring for someone as it relates to their job performance. So I've given ChatGPT all of the scores, all of the KPIs for the same people, and I'm going to go ahead and ask it a question. Please look at the data and see which courses seem to be the strongest predictor of KPI values. Okay, so it has told me how to go about doing it, and it's asked, would I like it to go ahead and do it? So I'm going to say, yes, please proceed. And it's told me it can't do it. So there are limitations within the tool, in this case, the raw tool we've used, ChatGPT, to be able to do the work that we've asked for. So now we're going to see if we can ask it a slightly different question to get what we want. Which of the courses seems to give the highest KPIs for learners? And again, it's telling me it can't do it. So sadly, this is where a live demo is failing, because I was doing this successfully earlier. So maybe we'll come back to it. But ChatGPT can, if you ask it the right prompt, and I asked exactly the same prompt earlier, provide a correlation for us for these courses through to the KPI score, and then recommend which course someone should be consuming. Any questions do we have in the chat, Susan, that we can tackle while we're here?
I'm answering a few of them. One of them was about, do content generators allow you to add requirements about accessibility? And I've answered that in the chat saying, yes, you can refine your prompts to include any limitations or restrictions or additions that you need. It's a whole process called prompt engineering to get to the correct output. And yes, to Liz Naylor, you absolutely do need to have a human review absolutely every piece of AI output, accept nothing at face value. What else can I share here? Why would a prompt work one day but not the next? Is a question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Why does my 5-year-old do one thing one day and one thing another day when asked to do exactly the same thing? Short answer is I don't know. But what I will say is each of these sessions was opened individually, so they're coming with slightly different context. So that's possibly why. And going back to Liz's comment, that again is another reason as to why you want the human in the loop, to observe what the output looks like and whether it makes sense. Think of it, for example, with the KPI pieces as a skill which is taught in schools of estimating, so that if you're doing a calculation, you can look at the end result and go, that doesn't look right. Or you can just use the raw calculation and maybe it's right, maybe it isn't. So that's the kind of analogy that I would give to the human in the loop for these kind of numerical predictions. Okay, so correlations then can lead to course recommendations, which can lead to personalized learning journeys, whether directly within an LMS or externally. Coaching. Coaching is something that is horribly human intensive. It is something that takes a lot of work. It is something that is hard to achieve in a consistent manner. So how about an AI coach on your shoulder, right? Right there to help you when you need it, identify what you need when you need it, and fill in some gaps. So let's give an example of that. So this is Notebook LM. It's a Google product where I've given it the Neovation website. And so let's say I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm asking, and they're asking me questions about this company I've just joined. I can ask this AI platform some questions and it can give me coaching. So I said, what are the best uses for SmarterU, which is our learning management system? It's given me them and given me the references back. I've asked, hey, someone's asked me what my elevator pitch is. Here's my elevator pitch now for SmarterU. So this kind of live ability to ask questions and get coaching during conversations is something that we see a lot of future for within the L&D world, as knowledge becomes less static and more kind of just in time. And thank you for clarifying what JIT means, Susan. I come from a manufacturing background of a long, long time ago where just in time was just being implemented. So this type of live coaching and bringing audio in, bringing live calls in for coaching is something that can be done now within the AI environment. So connecting your call dialer through to a live coaching platform is straightforward. There are lots of them out there within the sales world. Things like Gong are good platforms to take a look at. But things like Otter as a call recorder and summarizer, and we can send links out for all of these, I think, Susan, afterwards, is something to look at as well. So live coaching for learners when they need it, as they need it.
Just if I can talk about Notebook LM, Philip, if you can go back to that demo
I
slide.
certainly can. I am coming to it later with a different use case I think you'll be thrilled with.
Okay, I just want to mention that you can have multiple sources of all different kinds of files. So it's not you just put in one thing and it digests it. You can have multiple documentation, and I'll let Philip share his other surprise at the end. I don't steal his thunder, but Notebook LM is my personal favorite tool. I use it every single day.
So let's take a look at that now. We've actually got something here where I've added multiple sources. I've got a presentation I did on continuous compliance training. I've got the SmarterU content on compliance training. And I can go ahead and generate a podcast based on that content, which will cover the content in a conversational way between two people. It's generated a 22-minute podcast about continuous compliance training based on the content here. It's a conversation between two people. The voices are pretty good. It's conversational. I would advise all of you to sign up for our podcast, so ably produced by Susan, and experience those live, because that's what we're using to generate volumes of content. Now, imagine that you have a large content development project that looks like you need 20 hours of training for the learners, but you only have what you think of as maybe 10 hours worth of material and that 10 hours is tough to fill, but it's a mandatory requirement because of legislation that it's 20 hours time in seat. Well, what you can do then is use this kind of podcast generation to provide supplemental audio content to the other material you're providing and generate, in this case, I generated 22 minutes of content by uploading a couple of documents, reviewing it, and clicking generate podcast. So there may be some interesting use cases there as legislative bodies aren't yet adjusting to the fact still that what is a 20-hour ILT, instructor-led training course, isn't 20 hours if you deliver it online. It's probably closer to 10. They're still requiring the 20-hour time in seat piece. This may be a way of helping you as L&D professionals fill that gap. And I do see a comment quickly there from Liz. Yes, absolutely. Make sure that you are working with your organization and that other people know what tools you're using and you've got permission. Totally echo that. Now let's move on and talk about another use case that we're seeing increasingly, and I think there's a huge amount of value to be added for the L&D teams in enabling this. Content surfacing. So if you're like us, if you're like any organization, you've got PowerPoints here, you've got audio recordings there, you've got some webinars that someone's done, you've got PDFs over here, you've got this other thing over there, and it's all somewhat organized, but it's not all in one place. Bringing it all together, putting it in one place after work from an L&D team or an outside contractor to be able to put it together in a meaningful way and building what we call a content brain. So it's something that contains content that has been, for want of a better expression, cleaned so that it is relevant, appropriate, not all over the place, putting it in one place, and then as an L&D professional, being able to access that when you need it to be able to build courses or handouts or something like that. This is something that we're working very heavily on, is doing this with organizations because we see it as a huge step forward for L&D teams to be able to access things more easily, be able to develop better things more quickly through using AI on this content to be able to produce more. Also for learners, right? Giving them access to all of this information which they can search. So now let's take a look at some of the tools we use. And these are just some. We've seen Notebook LM already. Susan preempted me and we jumped in, did that one early. Adobe Firefly is something that we use for image generation. So I've got a prompt here. I'm thinking about safety training, factory environment with the table saw, showing the guards, and someone operating it. Okay, so now I got my initial set of images. They weren't what I wanted. So now I'm asking it to make modifications so that it's something that's more useful for me. Pretty simple use case, but it's something that will save a lot of time looking through stock photography libraries or, heaven forbid, having to get in and edit and make changes to images myself. And I know that people on my team now are laughing as they're hearing me saying me getting in and making changes to images myself, because not my skill set. AI video generation based on prompts. So this was a prompt to produce an introduction to compliance training. Now the audio is not going to be coming across. because Zoom was not being particularly helpful today in enabling us to share it. But this type of production of video, very quick, very straightforward. Again, not as good as, let's say, we're doing live video shooting, but you don't need live actors, you don't need a studio. So many implications for maintainability as well as actual creation in the first place. Though one of the risks we're running into with maintainability is the AI tools are evolving very quickly. And just because we had a particular voice narrator 6 months ago doesn't mean that the tool hasn't upgraded itself. So we still may not have access to that particular voice actor. Okay. Napkin. I love Napkin. So Napkin is generating some content based on the importance of continuous compliance training. Okay, so far, seen this before. It's just generating text content. Okay, that's interesting, but we've seen it before. Napkin can then go ahead and generate images that relate to that content. So here we are. It's generated 4 images that may be related, may be useful. So pros and cons, different styles of images. And again, none of these is a one size fits all, does everything that you need, but it's another tool to be able to produce this type of image quickly rather than the graphic designer having to do it. Final tool I'm going to look at, and then I know, Susan, I need to get onto foes and the future, but I want to dwell on the positive, not the negative. This is more for organizations that might be providing courses to external partners. This is code generation. This is a landing page that has been entirely generated by AI. So I asked it to generate a course catalog page, generated the code for me, and now it's going to generate a preview, and I'm going to be able to see what that looks like. I can make changes, I can iterate the prompts, but again, simplifies the creation, gives you a starting place for these type of pieces. Okay, Susan, I know I need to move on, so we're going to get on to foes now. AI is not very good. I'm better at building these things. Yes, you absolutely are. You absolutely are better at building these things than AI is. But remember our 5-year-old? 5-year-olds learn and they do eventually outstrip us. They learn, AI learns quicker than your average 5-year-old, and it's learning 24/7, 365. So yeah, our skill sets may need to evolve to do something different. And maybe higher value, maybe just different. Another common concern about AI, and AI as a foe, is it just makes stuff up. Welcome to our 5-year-old. If anyone has a 5-year-old or has had a 5-year-old, 5-year-olds just make stuff up. And we teach them not to, but we do still have to pay attention to them. So again, go back to think of it as a 5-year-old. Teach it not to make stuff up, correct it when it's wrong, and pay attention. So those are 2 of the most common fears or concerns I hear about AI, that people are better. Yes, they are. And it makes stuff up. Yes, it does. Both of those are solvable problems, though. I'm not going to play this video. For those of you who've seen it before, it's a fake of Morgan Freeman, looks like Morgan Freeman, sounds like Morgan Freeman, isn't Morgan Freeman. Again, we'll send a link out to this later. Watch it. The ability to fake things is the thing that keeps me up at night worrying about AI. And I don't think it's going away. I don't think there's a solution. Privacy and confidentiality. How many people on the call are Canadian? Very quick poll. Okay, lots of Canadians on the poll. Canadians are, and I'm speaking as an adopted Canadian, live here, love it. Canadians are very concerned typically about where's my data, what it's being used for, who has access to it. I'm going to express a couple of personal, not corporate opinions now. Likely is, whatever your data is, government has access to it now if it wants it. That's NSA, Canadian equivalents, GCHQ in the UK. Odds are, if they want access to your data, they have access to your data. That's the bad news. The good news is you can pay attention to the licensing agreements that you enter into with these pieces and make educated decisions about it. I think we've grown, again, personal opinion, lazy about licensing agreements, and lots of people just click through and accept them. I have a smartwatch. My smartwatch measures all sorts of things about me. If my employer provided my smartwatch, that could conceivably, not that my employer would do it, be used for all sorts of predictive purposes, future health. It could go to insurance companies for premiums and so on. So these are the things to be concerned about with privacy and confidentiality, measuring how learners are performing and using that for future prediction or for employment continuation purposes, for example. What I will say to that is these are all things that can happen now and people can do it manually. What AI is doing is making it easier and quicker to do that with the worry about hallucinations and errors. I don't come with a great sense of reassurance for anyone on the call that this is something that is going to get better or go away. I think there will be government legislation that relates to this. I think there may be some corporate cleanup on what they do with data, but it is always going to be a concern. Best way to deal with that is be explicit with people about what you're using data for internally, as well as looking at what it's used for externally. So be mindful. It's going to steal my job. Well, maybe. It's going to change your job. It's going to change everyone's job. These people, the image I have on screen, these were the Luddites. They got very, very upset about mechanical looms and things like that way back when, to the extent that they smashed them up. And then they ended up going away because mechanical looms just took over. And then more mechanization and more mechanization and more mechanization. The concern is that technology creates structural unemployment, right? Throws entire categories of people out of work who then can't get future employment. The long stretch of history says that that's not the case. Says that it changes, though individual people are severely impacted, and people in particular job areas may be severely impacted as well. But here's the question for you. Do you want to work with AI? Do you want to work for AI? Because that's the choice. There's no working and hoping it goes away, because it's not. My personal opinion is that the revolution we're going through is not dissimilar to the Industrial Revolution. And before the Industrial Revolution, everyone was a farmer, pretty much. Food production, agricultural revolution there. Pretty much everyone who wants a job has a job now, but they're not farmers. So that's the kind of transition we're going to go through, and it's going to happen very quickly. And this is the one that concerns me the most. So again, personal opinion, stay ahead of it. It is not going to steal your job, but it is going to change it dramatically. And now my favorite piece to talk about in these presentations is transfer of risk. So what do I mean by that? We've talked about the things that AI can do wrong. It can hallucinate. It can make stuff up out of whole cloth. It can get things wrong. It can do all of these things. But let's say you've got a 20-page manual and you've got time to create training on about a quarter of it. So you create training on about a quarter of it, and there's 3/4 of it that you ask someone to read. So you're not creating training. You're hoping that people will read it, they'll look things up. Um, there's a bunch of risk associated there that people will not read it or make stuff up or not know what to do. So what we're doing, or what you can do with AI, is change the risk that that is happening to a risk of hallucination or error. It's not eliminating risk, it's moving it from here to here. And there will be some places where it applies and some places where it doesn't. Some places you want to do it, some places where you don't. But here's the really good news. It requires a person in the loop to make those decisions, to review the material that's produced and make judgment calls about what is appropriate to sit where. So when you have conversations internally or externally about, oh my goodness, AI might produce hallucinations. Yes, it might. Absolutely. Might it produce training material or stuff that is completely wrong? Absolutely, it might. And we can mitigate that. But the risk of not doing anything about training with something exists if you don't do something. AI as the future. Okay. So every single innovation in learning, in technology, information technology specifically, has prompted us as humans to believe the sky is falling. Writing is bad. Printing press is bad. Telephone is bad. Schools are bad. Radio is bad. Email is bad. Social media is bad. Maybe some of them are, but these type of innovations are going to happen. They have happened. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. There just isn't. So what happens as these innovations happen is that we need to pay attention to the concerns that we have and make sure that we're ameliorating them and that we're trying to spot the things that we're not concerned about yet, but we probably should be. So, for example, Twitter and Facebook could harm moral values was the concern back in 2009. Right now, it might be more about lack of accuracy and truthfulness. So every type of technology does exactly this kind of thing. We've panicked about it every time. The scary thing about this one, though, is it's happening much more quickly. And the pace is accelerating. Gazing into a crystal ball, my forecasts, traditional course content may become one of two things: quick and good enough or deeply immersive. The middle ground may fall away because quick and good enough can maybe do with AI. Deeply immersive needs us, needs professionals. All of these tools we've talked about are going to proliferate and change so quickly that it's hard to keep up with the latest thing. Hard to pick an image tool when the next one does something better, next one does something better, next one does something better. That's going to be tough. The tools will evolve into platforms. So it won't, right now, they're largely, this does chat, this does image creation, this does video creation, this does this, this does this, this does this. People like that, but they like a place to go for all of these things. So these tools are going to evolve into do everything platforms or do more thing platforms. So we can have some interesting choices to make as to where we go with that. Learning management system platforms may change radically to be much more about just-in-time knowledge delivery. In the same way as if you want to know something now, you probably go to YouTube if you want to figure out how to do something quickly. This may happen with learning management systems. But here is the really, really good news for everyone on this call. Because we can provide value in a higher, more strategic sense, because we can get at outcomes and we can provide information around outcomes and how what we do translates to it, learning and development professionals have got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really become business partners in the same way as HR professionals have. HR professionals doing hiring and internal HR pieces have called themselves business partners and have been business partners, helping drive business outcomes. It's been tough for L&D in a lot of ways because measurable outcomes have been tricky to get at, have been tricky to then correlate back to the training that we've done. All of these tools, being able to create stuff quickly and easily, being able to do correlations and so on, are going to enable us as L&D professionals to be able to truly become business partners and have a seat at that table. Personal forecasts. So thank you very much, everyone. I think we have a few minutes left for questions. Susan, what do we have? What did I miss? Or did you ably answer everything in the chat?
There doesn't seem to be any outstanding questions, though I'm sure as people review your presentation, once we get the recording out to them, that they will have more. So you'll get an email with the recording and all of the resources that we've talked about. And feel free to reply to that. It'll either go to Philip, myself, or if you have a sales director already assigned to you at Neovation, and they'll be happy to jump in and answer questions or direct them back to Philip. I did want to ask a question of the room, though, as we were going through. I thought perhaps a future webinar on specific to prompt engineering for L&D might be of interest. So if I could get some show of hands on a buy-in for that, some possibly in the early summer as quickly as I can get it put together. You can also add that into the feedback in the survey that you will get once we sign off from the webinar. We are coming up very close to the top of the hour, so any last minute questions
Can
from
I
anyone?
jump in and say something, please,
You bet.
Susan?
I was going to hand it to you to close. So,
Oh, thank you. Well, anyone should feel free to reach out to me personally. I am happy to discuss or dig into detail with all of these things, whether on a philosophical or a technical level, with anyone on the call.
I'll put your email in the chat.
Please, very happy to discuss this. And whoever wants to talk about doing more with this, doing less with this, fears, concerns, excitement, I'm very excited, but also very, very nervous about where this is going.
Yeah. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our time. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Philip, for all the work that you put into this and the research. And I'm sure that we will have a future iteration of this in the fall, because the AI world will have changed yet another phase in the AI revolution by then. Thank you for the feedback on the prompt engineering webinar. I will work to make that happen. But thank you to everyone who gave us your time and attention today. We appreciate you. Watch for news coming up on emails on future webinars that we're hosting and other events. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much.